Welcome to Taking the Higher Road, a DriverReach and FreightWaves production. I'm your host, Jeremy Reymer, founder and CEO of DriverReach. On this show, I interview industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insights to the driver lifecycle as we discuss the industry's greatest challenges, driver recruiting and retention. I appreciate the feedback we've received on the show so far. Mark Willis from Road Dog Trucking on SiriusXM. Let me know how much he enjoys the podcast. Thank you, Mark. And don't forget to rate and review Taking the Higher Road in Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and wherever else you listen. This week, I'm really excited to be joined by an industry maverick, a trailblazer, Brad Vaughn, Vice President of Recruiting at Maverick Transportation. Welcome to the podcast, Brad. Great to see you.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's great to be here.
We're looking for some solid takeaways as we get your views on the state of driver recruiting today. We'll learn what sets you and Maverick apart. We'll discuss the unique challenges that the driver shortage brings. And I'll also introduce our newest segment called A Deeper Dive. But before we go there, I'm curious. I know you, as you can tell from the books behind me, I enjoy reading. You're a reader as well. What types of book do you prefer?
I do. I tend to go towards biography, autobiography, more often than not.
Anything in particular that you've read recently that you would recommend?
I reread Unbroken recently, which is the Louis Zamperini story. That's one I got to reread it because I've loaned it out so much it finally made its way back to me. So I got to reread it again.
That's funny that you say that because I've got all these books and probably I've read about 20% of them. For every one book I read, I buy about 6 more, and I just like to do that. And so once in a while, if somebody would come over and say, "Hey, can I borrow that?" I'm afraid if I let them borrow it, I'll never get it back, and if I haven't read it yet. So now let's talk about the state of driver recruiting. Obviously, we've been probably in more of an influx the past year or so than certainly I've seen it in my career. What are your thoughts on the state of the industry today, specifically driver recruiting? Do you feel like it's harder than it's ever been?
I do. It's never been an easy job, but it's gotten tougher with the pandemic. A lot of people, particularly experienced drivers, hunkered down. They didn't look to change. They stayed with what was safe, and they're still kind of doing that to a degree. Now, at Maverick, we hire a lot of students, and so we have our own driving school, so we do bring a lot of people into the industry, and that has not slowed, thankfully. Now, obviously, students coming from outside schools has slowed because, a lot of those schools closed during the pandemic. Some of them didn't open back up. The ones that did are doing it safely with social distancing, which means they're having a lot smaller classes now. A lot of them quit allowing people to come in and recruit as well. So we definitely saw a slowdown in the students coming from the outside schools, and I was thankful to have our school. It's as tough as I've seen it, for sure.
How did you deal with testing and permitting in your school? Are you able to manage that yourself, or do you need to use a third party or the state?
We go through the state, and luckily in Arkansas, they did slow down, and in fact, they did stop for maybe a week or two, which definitely threw some kinks in our pipeline and made it tough. But it wasn't so much those states as it was other states that really, Texas is one that comes to mind. Texas, they shut down their DMVs for a while, and so we had drivers coming to work for us with expired licenses that we were taking letters saying, "Hey, this is technically not expired," and basically putting some burden on our safety department to track these people and try to route them through Texas when it did open back up. And every state did it a little bit differently. So it certainly presented some challenges that we hadn't otherwise faced.
I'll bet. And especially in 2020 or what you're seeing today, how about the quality of drivers? Can you speak to that at all? Are you noticing any difference?
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to the categorization of the driver. Are they a student? Are they needing someone to get their license? I did see some improvement in the quality in regards to drivers students wanting to get their license. And, I was really hoping, we as an industry have strived for so long to how do we get the Knights of the Road image back? Yeah. And I think this pandemic took a big leap towards that. with the fact that everybody else is hunkered down at home, but you still need that driver to bring you that much needed toilet paper you're stockpiling or whatever else it was. In terms of quality, when it comes to experienced drivers, the really good experienced drivers, they're hunkered down. They're not leaving. You get the one-offs here or there, but I'm not seeing those guys that have 5, 6, 7 years hopping from job to job. They're staying put. So, thankfully the students, and like I said, the quality went up in regards to the sponsorship. And I think some of that goes to the image and some improvement. And then also you got to look at 2020. A lot of carriers did some pretty substantial pay increases.
Right.
And throwing those pay increases out there always helps to attract people to the industry.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the essential workers that the trucking, the truck drivers were recognized as this past year because of the pandemic. And all we can hope for, I think, is that does improve. Not only has it improved the image, but it improves the quality of those students that are going to come through. And hopefully we can continue that well beyond 2021. As you get applicants that come in, are you recognizing any shift in terms of, are they full DOT applications? Are they just lead forms? Are you seeing one versus the other, more so? And I should say, do you feel strongly about, one versus the other?
Well, obviously, any recruiter would prefer a full DOT application. It takes multiple steps out of the process, speeds the whole sales cycle up. But to your point, that was a big swing that we saw in 2020 was that we started getting a lot less full applications and a lot more short forms, which it adds, I'll take whatever I can get. I don't want to be picky. If you're interested and you just want to give me a name and a phone number, I'll take it. But it just adds steps to the process. And so what it means is I've got to better utilize my recruiter's time. I've got to better utilize my drip marketing campaigns. I've got to text blast, email blast to get these people to fill out a full application. And in doing that, I've got to do a better job of selling them on what I have, because I know that I wasn't the only one they did that short form for. They
Sure.
went and did that across the board, which means I better make sure my recruiters are trained and ready to go to battle, so to speak, because they're competing with a lot of other carriers.
You made a couple interesting comments that I know we'll touch on here in a little bit, but you said the sales cycle. You referred to it as the sales cycle. And it's music to my ears, because I agree and understand how important and how much of a parallel there is with recruiting and sales. And you are acknowledging that when you get those short forms, that puts more pressure on your recruiters to have those conversations that they need to be having anyway. Hopefully, that's going to lead to more, conversions. But and so I appreciate that, because I think not everybody has that same mindset. From in 2020, what would you say, from a hurdle, what was your biggest challenge that you felt like you had to overcome? I should say about a year ago with the onset of the pandemic.
I guess the big one was just the adjustment. I was lucky in that our IT department had been building a disaster recovery plan for years and years and years. So the transition to home wasn't huge. It wasn't bad. It was, I don't want to say it was plug and play, because obviously you have hiccups along the way of this phone's not working, this one's echoing, this one's doing something like that. So we've had to make adjustments. But, we've had to make adjustments from, we don't bump drivers in the same room anymore. We're not using public transportation anymore. We're going to put you in a rental car and you're going to drive yourself in. So there was a lot of adjustments that had to be made. And obviously early on in the pandemic, we just quit bringing people in. Mm-hmm. When the COVID cases were as high as they were, we decided to be safe and just not bring people in, and then have to kind of rethink how we did everything to ensure that we were keeping everybody safe. So on one hand, I was very thankful that the technology was not a stumbling block. And I say that because I've been in this industry for 20 years and I've got a lot of peers that I benchmarked with, and it was a stumbling block for a lot of people. So I was thankful for that. but it was a challenging year to say the least, because like I referred to, it got harder to unseat an experienced driver, and we had to rely much more on our student program and rely on communication. And I will say that through all this and in the working from home, I think I've seen our company's communication improve dramatically. We're having more meetings. Everybody's more plugged in. My team's more plugged in. And that was a lot of the feedback I got at the end of the year was, I've never felt so plugged in. I know everything that's going on now, because I guess everyone feared that not being together, we would lose it. So we over communicated, and it turned out well.
Well, and those communications are more intentional, right? It's not just water cooler talk anymore. It's like, hey, we've got a meeting. We're talking about something important, and we're making progress. And I agree. We're leveraging technology in a way today that you said 20 years. I mean, didn't exist 20 years ago. We couldn't have done this 20 years ago. If we were in this same boat, the complaints that your peers had, we all would have had. But I feel like that's a good segue, referencing how few hiccups and challenges that you had compared to some of the peers that you communicate with, is just talking about the Maverick Way in general. Because I know Maverick as a company has a great reputation from being innovative and progressive. In a lot of ways, safety, recruiting, and so on. What do you feel like really sets you apart when it comes to your driver marketing and recruiting efforts?
I think where we kind of got ahead of the curve in terms of marketing and driver recruiting was our use of video. Our use of video and our use of social media was something that we kind of just wrapped our arms around and jumped on early. I had wanted to do some videos early on, and went to a few ad agencies in town and said, hey, here's kind of what I want to do. I want to put together a recruiting video, and had some serious sticker shock over what that was going to cost, to a point where I sat down and crunched the numbers and said, it might just be easier just to hire someone to do this and not outsource it. And after much deliberation, we landed ourselves a really talented videographer that knows our brand, understands our voice, and just really gave us a competitive leg up in terms of use of video. We kind of embraced the technology in terms of social media, in terms of texting, and trying to reach drivers where they want to be reached. Not sending an email that's not going to get looked at or reviewed. Not sending a letter to the house that no one's going to see, but texting them links to videos, texting them links to descriptions or interviews with drivers that are actually in that division that we're talking to them about, so they can get questions answered kind of straight from the horse's mouth, sort of thing. And a lot of my competition has stepped up now, and I'm seeing a lot more videos. But yeah, I feel like we got a little bit ahead of the curve on that. It gave us a competitive advantage.
Well, I wonder what their inspiration was. I think there was a recent video. It was a driver appreciation video, a Maverick reproduction of Old Town Road, and that is fantastic. So for the viewers, if you haven't seen that on YouTube, that's amazing. And I think you really appreciate. I think that probably spoke volumes for not just about the company, but just the culture that exists there. And my wife was watching it, and she said, that's really cool. Like, that's something that's a place that if I was a driver, I'd be interested in working at, just because I see the way that they're interacting with each other and the fun that they're having. That's more than just a job. And that's important. That starts at the top, having that culture.
Agree.
Now,
and
speaking
of
of video,
a lot of those people singing in those videos are our executive teams. So.
Right. Yeah, no, I recognize a few of them, so that's so cool. And speaking of video, I think this is a good segue to introduce our newest segment, A Deeper Dive, where we take questions from a listener seeking expert advice. And it just so happens, coincidentally, that the question is about video and the use of video. And the question is, how do I get buy-in from leadership to use video and other more modern approaches to attract drivers? I mean, you might not have this same conundrum because it seems like that is, I mean, the company from the top down is innovative and progressive, but how, if that isn't the case, what are your thoughts, or do you have any advice on how to get buy-in from leadership?
You know, I almost think you've got to bring them a product first and show it to them. And I say that not to say you got to go hire a videographer and it's got to be this production. You don't need all that. What you can do is do it on your cell phone and, you know, do a testimonial. Grab a driver of yours in the break room, pull them in an office. What made you choose us? You know, what do you like about it? What do you not like about it? And, you know, testimonials go a long way. And I know for us, I'm really lucky to have a group of drivers that is more than willing to send referrals in and more than willing to sing our praises out on the road. And if you could get a driver to shoot a couple of those, put those in front and go, what do you think a driver would say if he saw this video? What if I put this on Facebook? What if I put this on Instagram? What do you think a driver would say? I think you got to bring a product first and show it to them. And it's not hard to do. It's not costly. It's not expensive. But I think that's where you start.
Take some time, take some creativity, and some inspiration. I think that they can get if they take a look at what you're doing. Minus some of the budget, perhaps. The early days,
Right.
Maybe the early days. From a recruiting standpoint, let's talk about what you look for in a recruiter. Are there any specific traits or qualities that you're looking for, you need to see?
You know, I look for sales experience more than anything else. If I can get, you know, years ago, I used to try to target, I got to have somebody that's done this before. They got to know trucking. And what I found, and not to say this is always the case, but I found a lot of people that came with bad habits. They did things that we don't do. They may mislead somebody, maybe not lie to them, but leave out a factor they didn't think they wanted to hear. And that's not the way I do things. I'm going to be transparent almost to a fault. But what I found is if I can bring people in who have some sort of previous sales experience, be it telephone experience, telephone sales experience, I can teach you trucking. I can teach you how it works, how it pays. But the sales is a little harder to teach. So if I can get somebody that's already got some of that experience and got that personality type that is competitive people do really well for me in a recruiting standpoint. If I can get somebody that's a little bit competitive and not afraid of sales. And, you know, a lot of people look at sales like it's a bad word. You know, sales means you're tricking people. So it's not that at all. And I've been fighting to overcome that for years. But if I can get some people that have some previous experience like that, they traditionally do really well.
Yeah, they're wired the same way. They're wired the way that you're looking for. And they generally have the type of personality that is easy to connect with people and build rapport and empathy and so on. And interestingly, and I think we align incredibly in the concept that recruiting and sales go hand in hand. And you actually, in exactly what to say, you actually are quoted on the back of the book here, that it simplified the sales process and enabled my recruiters to easily grasp how they can improve their process and positively influence applicants to join our team. Now, this book that you're referring to, exactly what to say, the CDL Driver Recruiting Edition, is that something that you use? Do you incorporate those magic words into any sort of recruiter training or coaching?
Absolutely. So, you know, years ago, we had put together some specific sales process. I always call them a process because it's not a script. I don't want people reading a script. It needs to be as relaxed and as conversational as possible. And, you know, I always say, you know, if you've ever swam laps, there's dividers in the pool. You don't hold on to the divider the whole way down. It's just there to keep you on track. And that's much like our process is. And so when the book came about and I read the book, it was like, this is hand in hand with the process we've already had. And I actually had a plan to use a quote from the book. I have given it to my managers. And so my managers have the book right now. So I didn't have it to quote from, but yeah, we basically took it and took things from the book and integrated them into some of our training for new recruiters. You know, a lot of the magic word uses, those sort of things, we utilize those a lot.
Well, first of all, it sounds like that was an invitation for me to send you a new book. so I'm picking up what you're putting down. So I'll get that to you. What would you say was your most effective campaign? Because I want to ask, like, give us a high, and then I also want to ask you maybe one of your most embarrassing mistakes. But let's start with the good. What was maybe your most effective campaign that you feel like that really hit the nail on the head? Anything you can think about?
We've done a few over the years. We did one years ago on how to spot a Maverick, and it was just about how to recognize. We did an internal campaign and an external campaign. Excuse me. The internal was for drivers for referrals. How do you spot somebody you think would make a good Maverick? And the external was more of us bragging on our drivers. Hey, here's how you spot them: their professionalism, their willingness to help, that sort of thing. That one did really well for us. I've had a lot of missteps over the years, for sure. Years and years and years ago, we hired a country singer, a local country singer from Arkansas, to record a song called "Are You Maverick Tough?" And it was about, because we're flatbedders, and flatbed's hard work, it's labor intensive. And so he recorded this song, Maverick Tough, and we used it in some ads. We used it in some radio ads. And then we had our drivers actually come to us and go, "Can we cut it with the Maverick Tough stuff? People are trying to pick fights with me in truck stops routinely." No. So we had to reel that one back and go, "Yeah, sorry, we didn't think about that." And we just continued using some of that stuff.
Well, yeah, that's the unintended consequence, I guess. Sometimes you've got so much testosterone in the industry. We're trying to fix that, right? We're trying to improve the image of the industry. We're trying to get more women in the industry. And in fact, that's probably a good segue to just talk about the driver shortage in general. I mean, there's that's a pretty controversial topic. You get people who, there's no driver shortage, there's just a pay issue. And there's plenty of people who will feel like, sure, that's a factor, but the reality is we have less. It seems like the demand is far outstrips the supply of drivers today. Do you have any thoughts on that? What's your opinion from a driver shortage standpoint?
I agree. I mean, I absolutely think there is a shortage. Pay probably plays something in there, but pay is continuing to go up and up and up. But obviously, we're getting, in the truck driving community, we're getting second, third career people in the industry. So we're getting people who tried this first, or the factory closed down, and now they're having to look for other options. They don't want to relocate their family. So they look at driving. And unfortunately, I think sometimes it gets looked at as the last resort. Well, I'll do this, but until something better comes along. And, driver pay has consistently gone up and will consistently continue to go up, as it should. It's a tough job, but it pays really well. And so obviously I do think there is a shortage. I don't know that it's rare that I've ever been at a time that I go, well, I got more than I need. Let's stop here.
Right. Well, and even if you ever got to that point, maybe that point was in 2008, 2009, when you had a global recession and it was really tough. Even then, you don't want to turn off the recruiting spigot. If anything, you look to top grade. You look to maybe hire drivers who unfortunately just because of circumstances became available, who were Maverick. You spot some Mavericks and you hire them, and you might have to replace maybe some of the lower performing or unsafe or less safe drivers that you had. So
absolutely.
I don't know that you ever turn it off. So
no.
Now, another question if there's, and you hear this all the time, there's no silver bullet. But if there was one thing that that you can point to that would have the biggest impact on the driver shortage and make a difference in companies' abilities to hire drivers, better, easier. Any thoughts on what that could be?
It's got to be home time. You've got to have routine and regular home time. I think irregular route, OTR, out 3 to 4 weeks. The folks that want to do that are somewhat of a dying breed. There's not as many people that want to come in and do that anymore. And I say that because, at Maverick, we still offer that. And we offer dedicated, we offer regional. But what I find interesting is I'll take a call from a guy and he'll be desperate. He'll say, look, the power company's threatening to turn my lights off. My wife's car got repossessed. I'm in bad shape. I need your highest paying division you have. And I'll go, well, okay, well, that's our glass division. It's our highest paying division. It stays out 3 to 4 weeks. And he'll go, wait. The ad said home most weekends. And I said, well, we do have that as well. Just it's not our highest paying. And he'll go, well, either one's going to be more money than I was making. So let's talk about the weekend. So it's not always about money. I think home time plays a big role in that. And it really hit home because it's not just drivers. We went to work from home a year ago as a company. And I say we, not everybody. Obviously, our diesel techs can't work from home, and our drivers can't work from home. But those who could did. And what we found is they replied back and said, I love it. I've gained 2 to 3 hours a day with my family that I didn't otherwise have. I've taken out my commute time. I'm having lunch with my family. I'm seeing them more often. And drivers are no different. And so if you can provide them more home time, I think that's where we're going to really get more people into this industry.
Yeah, I agree. Quality of life. Well, you mentioned working from home and the silver lining that came about that we recognized. And I was thinking, when do I go back to the office? And then I'd have to put on pants. I kind of like just working from home. So now, for those who are working in the office, I think pants are appropriate. Thank you. I really appreciate you joining me today, Brad. It's great to see you, and please stay in touch, and let's do this again.
Absolutely, Jimmy. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And thank you for joining me for another episode of the Taking the Higher Road podcast, and for spreading the word to your industry peers. We really appreciate it. Remember to follow along at driverreach.com/podcast. Please submit any questions or comments, including those which may appear in upcoming deeper dive segments at podcast@driverreach.com. And don't forget to rate and review the Taking the Higher Road podcast in Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever else you listen. Until next time, thank you for taking the higher road.